This episode of the podcast is brought to you by J.D. Chapman Insurance Agency. Are you an aspiring business owner or entrepreneur looking to be part of New York's multi-billion-dollar cannabis industry? If so, the decisions you make in these early stages are imperative to your future success. And I'll tell you from personal experience that you will face risk on a daily basis. So it's important to have a comprehensive insurance program in place with a trusted, reliable partner. J.D. Chapman offers special insurance for cannabis growers, medical and adult use dispensaries, edibles manufacturers, testing labs, ancillary businesses, and more. Available coverage includes general liability, product liability, excess liability, and workers' comp. In this exciting and rapidly growing industry, it's important to have a partner you can trust. Contact J.D. Chapman today at 315-986-4062 for all your cannabis insurance needs. J.D. Chapman, from seed to sale, they have you covered.
The views and opinions expressed on this show belong solely to the hosts and their guests and do not reflect the views of any outside institutions unless explicitly stated.
What's up, everyone? My name is Steve Vanderwall, and I'm the host of Cannabis Cum Laude, a podcast devoted entirely to cannabis. This podcast will cover a full spectrum of topics, including cultivation, business, medicine, politics, culture, advocacy, and everything in between. Because let's face it, the cannabis industry is very complicated. It's robust, and it has a ton of moving parts. So it's going to be my job to help you understand it a little bit better. So tune in every week for a brand new episode. And if you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. And if you really, really, really like the show and are interested in sponsoring, please shoot me an email at logistics@cannabiscumlaude.com. Now enjoy the show. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Cannabis Cum Laude. I am here today with Rosanna St.John, the owner and founder of Canna Bookkeeper LLC. She is a cannabis tax and accounting wizard, and she's going to answer some questions for us regarding cannabis taxes, 280E, and stuff regarding the card program. So, Rosanna, thanks so much for hopping on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to dig into all this.
So before we get started, just give me a little bit of your background and your credentials, and tell me a little bit about Canna Bookkeeper LLC.
Yeah, so I've spent the last 15 years managing small businesses and small teams. I've been working with sole proprietors in building their independent businesses and helping them grow, mostly with like commission-based hairstylists and independent contractors. Right after the pandemic, I decided to start my own business because, why not? And I started Canna Bookkeeper. It's been just over a year. And I'm so excited to see where New York is going and where cannabis is going. There's so much opportunity in this industry, and it's ancillary right now. Yeah. So I'm excited to be a part of it and see it grow.
Yeah, you're in, I think, especially good position because while everybody's fighting for the plant touching licenses, what people really, what every business, regardless of what license you have, you're going to need a bookkeeper and a damn good accountant. And I think you're set up to do really well. So congratulations on the new business. That's exciting.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, there's not very many cannabis bookkeepers and accountants just yet. So I'm excited to see who else jumps in.
Well, there's a level of knowledge that you need to have in the cannabis industry, specifically around things like 280E, which we talk about all the time on the podcast. So can you break down what exactly is 280E and how does it affect cannabis businesses?
280E is my favorite and least favorite thing to talk about. It's scary and it's a beast, but don't be intimidated, right? Because as long as you have a team that is knowledgeable, you're prepared, right? So 280E is the Internal Revenue Code that prohibits taxpayers who are engaged in the business of trafficking controlled substances, right? You cannot deduct typical business expenses if you're trafficking controlled substances. So this is where cannabis being federally illegal remains our issue.
So when you say trafficking, does that also mean like cultivation and manufacturing? Is that just retail? What exactly does that language trafficking mean?
Trafficking to me would be any movement. So you take it from where you're growing it
Yeah.
to the next building, and that's trafficking. As
Right.
soon as it exchanges hands, I would consider that trafficking.
Yeah. So normally in a regular, non-trafficking or non-cannabis business, you would be able to write off ordinary business expenses, which really, when when you start looking at, effective tax rates, things to offset those tax rates are normally deductions. But that's not so much the case in this industry. So what are some typical ordinary expenses that can normally be written off, but in the case of cannabis, can't be written off?
Yeah. So the major ones are going to be your rent and your mortgage. Those are two of your biggest expenses, right? The next one you're going to have is payroll. Every other business is going to get to write off their payroll, but cannabis businesses, you're 280E compliant, you're not writing off payroll. It's rent, office equipment, it's payroll, advertising, utilities, insurance. You have so much equipment. Think about the depreciation. A regular business can write that off. A cannabis business cannot write that off. So your equipment, that's it. That's yours. You're not really doing anything else with it.
It's interesting. I always like to, as a cultivator, I always like to look at this from a cultivation perspective because that's, the license route that I'd like to take. So you say utilities, which is a huge part of cultivation, lights and water and all that, which would really help to offset, the cost of production. So if you're a cultivator, you're not allowed to write off any of that stuff. I wasn't always sure if that was considered utilities or if those were considered cost of goods sold. Can you clarify that for me?
Yeah. So this is something we're still looking for clarification on from New York State and kind of all over. Harborside. The Harborside case is a great example of why we need clarification. But as it stands right now, it's the write-offs you're allowed are seed, soil, nutrients, and seed, soil, nutrients, and I believe water would be your last one. But you have to be documenting everything properly because I'm sure that there's stipulations within that. And you have to make sure that you're following the rules and documenting it the way that they want it. Because even if you make a mistake, as long as it's documented properly, you may get a little bit of leeway. But if not, as a cultivator, your hands are kind of tied, right? You can't write off your electric. You can't write off all the lights you're buying. You can't write off the depreciation on them. Mm-hmm. Your equipment is really, it's your huge asset.
Yeah. That's really, when you're looking at setting up a facility, it's all initial expense, your initial expenses, your lights, your tables, your dehues, all that stuff, which is mainly setup costs, which are write-offable. And then it's your utilities. So as a cultivator, if, things, we could operate like normal businesses, it would actually be pretty attractive because most of it would, you would be able to write most of this business off. Not the case right now. Now,
right.
What would have to happen federally to make this 280E thing, I don't know if go away is the right phrase, but I think because it is a Schedule I drug and it is illegal at the federal level, and that's where the trafficking part comes in, what would have to happen federally for this to change?
Federally, it just needs to be descheduled and decriminalized. As soon as it's off of scheduled controlled substances, it is no longer required to be 280E compliant. The whole reason 280E started was because of a cocaine case. And this individual in the 80s, was writing off expenses for his illegal cocaine trafficking business, and thus 280E. So, obviously cocaine and cannabis are two very different substances and two very different things. So we just need federally for that to be recognized.
Now, if the Safe Banking Act were to, and I'm not super well read on the Safe Banking Act, so I apologize in advance, but if Safe Banking Act was pushed through, would that have any sort of effect on 280E, or would we need a federal descheduling in order to see that change?
If it was descheduled, you wouldn't need to worry about safe banking.
Okay.
It would it would trickle down, and it's not just cannabis that's affected by the safe banking either. Look at like hairstylists, tattoo artists. A lot of construction is catch only now. You're looking at a lot of businesses that are going to be impacted, not just cannabis. I think that right now we're just the loudest group.
Yeah.
Because we're all coming out of the woodwork, right?
Yeah. It's one of the things is, even if you even look at these mature markets, I actually met somebody in Massachusetts a couple weeks ago who is an executive at a licensed vertically integrated cannabis facility in Massachusetts, a very, very successful one. By the book, they're very by the book. They're 280 compliant, everything. And because of the nature of his business, he's in sales. So often, if he does a big, wholesale, deal, he'll get a large commission check. And he was telling me that, he got a call from his bank after this huge wholesale deal went through and said, "Hey, we need you to come in because there's some to discuss these transactions." We're like, all right, that's fine. This is what I do. Here's all my proof. Shows up to the bank and there's 2 police officers there. And they're going through this whole thing, this anti-money laundering, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, even being compliant, even being a W-2 employee, blah, blah, blah. The feds had put him on the federal anti-money laundering list. He had to divest all of his retirement. His wife had to divest from her 403B. He's no longer allowed to use his money in the stock market or anything. It's complicated, and it's one of those things that I think people are, everyone's so jazzed up about licenses and what the future holds. And the reality is until we see some sort of policy change at the federal level, the financial part of this industry is still very fucking tough. And it can affect you for a long time. I would imagine he's going to be, until there's some big federal change, going to have a really hard time doing things with his money that aren't outside of, traditional banking. There's no investing, there's no, using any of these typical financial vehicles. So the federal difference in legality and scheduling between the federal and state really makes the financial side of this industry complicated.
Yeah. It puts your business in 2 different categories, right? Like when you're planning, when you're acting, you have to think about the federal tax implications and the state tax implications now. You can't just act, as one unit of what's being, when you're compliant and when you're not, because now, with CUNY, I'm all for moving forward with 280E not being a state thing. But it doesn't solve the root of the issue.
Yeah.
It brings us right back to what we're talking about.
Well, the frustrating thing about all this is, what makes cannabis a Schedule 1 drug is 2 qualifying factors: high potential for abuse and no medicinal value. Let's pretend one of those is true and one of those is not, right? You only need one to qualify as a Schedule 1 drug, both of which alcohol could be qualified. Highly abusive and really, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know if alcohol has any medicinal value. So what I don't understand is, over 35 states, both red and blue states, have some sort of medical program that should qualify. At what point can they take this through the court system to say, this is not right? I know there's court action being taken, but and you can probably speak on this better. How do we justify it still being a Schedule 1 drug if over almost 75% of the country at this point has a medical marijuana program? It's just crazy. It keeps me up at night a lot, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question that gets my heart racing, right? That's the one that people should be mad about. There's a few tax implications that I think are what's holding it back from being federally recognized.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I hate to say it, but everything is controlled by Big Pharma. So Big Pharma has no benefit in saying, yeah, this plant is medicinal. And the government is like, well, they kind of have all these other tax rules that medical, like prescription drugs and some over-the-counter drugs don't get taxed because they're medical. So recognizing cannabis as medical federally could really impact their ability to to tax us.
Now, do the current multi-state operators and medical companies subject to the same taxes as rec license holders?
Everyone is responsible legally for the same thing. The difference is going to be your team of lawyers, your team of accountants, and your team of financial advisors and planners. There are absolutely strategies and things that you can do and set up at the very beginning to offset, right? And to have the least amount of tax impact, I guess, because the cannabis businesses right now, as it stands, are looking at a 70% effective tax rate. And your regular business, your shoe store is looking at 30. Like, how are you taxing these businesses 70%? That means your take home is 30%. So people are looking at $1 million, right? This whole, that was the thing that got me on the card. People are looking at $1 million in sales. And they're like, oh my God, $1 million. That's amazing.
Generational wealth.
But they're not real. Yeah, right. They're not realizing 70% of that is not theirs. It's not going to be as successful for the individuals as they're making it sound. It's definitely going to be successful for New York State. But,
yeah, well, I think the problem is that, we're trying to figure out how do we transition people who've been doing this in the legacy market into the legal market to make it, attractive. And I'll tell you, going from making probably for the most people full margin, cash only businesses, most legacy operators, who knows what's going on, from a tax perspective, to moving into the legal market and not only being under the microscope of the regulators, but also getting 70% of your revenue taken from you. How is that attractive to anybody? How is that attractive to somebody who's never been in the cannabis industry before, let alone who's been doing it for decades underground? That's what we're trying to, our last episode, we've been talking about this amnesty proposal that's floating around the New York industry, which I think amnesty is a great step in the right direction. But, how do we incentivize these people beyond, just, hey, we're not going to, arrest you, or, hey, you get tax amnesty. How about maybe you get deductions, or maybe you get grant money, financially? How do we incentivize these people beyond just giving them a license, which quite frankly, isn't that attractive if you're going to lose 70% of your business? The big question we've been trying to answer is, how do we make it more attractive? Because right now, as somebody who's been chasing this dream for 4 years, the more that I learn and the more regulations and stuff to come out, to be honest with you, the less attracted I am to the industry. And it's it's kind of sad. And I know that there's a lot of people who are in the same boat.
Yeah, oh God, you would have a parade behind you for that entire remark. There's so many things that tax credits, right? That is where I would start. If you're going to give somebody a card facility and you're going to give them a license under, the card program, give them the tax credits instead of incentivizing other things, or it's less of a loop, right? Less of a hoop to jump through. Yeah. My suggestion, tax credits. But this DASNY card thing they're saying certain things. And then if you go onto the website, the DASNY website, and you read the rules and regulations and the stipulations, it ends with, can I read this to you? It ends with, by submitting a response, each respondent consents to such use and waives any and all claims against DASNY, OCM, CCB, and any other entity of the state.
So what exactly does that mean?
That is the opposite of amnesty. That is anything you say can and will be used against you by anyone that New York State sees fit. Yeah. Right?
Gotta read the fine print. That's scary.
Yeah, like Chris Alexander, you didn't mention that in our meeting.
It's tough too, because if you're not accustomed to reading legislative language, and really when you're reading policy, every single word matters, which is why I even get nervous on
read all the versions of the MRTA that come out, the conditional licenses. I'm always afraid to give my opinion on them because each individual word matters so much that if you're not a lawyer or speak the legalese or have that skill set, that you could misinterpret that and give somebody wrong information because it does matter. I had no idea about that. That's really kind of scary, actually.
Right. Like that is terrifying. So DASNY reserves the right to use and retain any and all responses. So your phone calls are going to get recorded. Everything you write down, everything you tell them is now New York State public record. Like that's what that essentially could be. I'm not a lawyer. These are all just like my opinions and my thoughts. But this is really important. And you're absolutely right. The folks that are coming that would qualify for an equity license, generally speaking, are going to have a harder time reading through this language and interpreting it in their case. And it's the other thing with that is like, okay, DASNY is going to do this amazing thing and they're going to provide this turnkey facility for you. In the turnkey facility, though, it's the designers, it's the marketing team, it's the lawyers, the accountants, the bookkeepers, and the programmers that New York State chooses. And you still pay for that. That all just gets lumped into your loan. They're not giving you anything, they're just fronting you. So perception is key on this entire card situation. It's a smokescreen. I really highly encourage anyone thinking about being a card applicant to speak to someone else who's participated in a DASNY program.
So let's back up a little bit. Let's give me a little bit of high level, like what is the card program and what is DASNY and how do they fit into this?
So the card program is New York State's conditional licenses. It's the conditional adult use dispensaries conditional adult use consumption.
Retail, I think. Conditional adult use retail dispensary, yeah.
There we go, retail dispensaries. And it's going to be the first round of licenses that go out. These are going to be the first, as we know right now, these are going to be the first open shops. So this is where all the farmers, their 146 licenses they've already given for growing, this is where all that product is supposed to go. It's supposed to be turnkey. So like imagine renting an apartment where everything's there and the fridge is full of food. But you're paying for the food, right? You're paying for the person stocking it. You're paying for where it came from. You're paying for all the logistics. You just don't have to worry about it.
And then the problem is, and I think that's could be a cool thing, providing, because that's the toughest thing, especially as we wait for regs. Like people have probably been sitting on real estate for years, just pissing money every single month, waiting for this opportunity. So I think that's great optically for the state to come in and say, hey, not only are we going to help you do this, but we're going to provide you a turnkey operation and give you a chance to win, right? Which there are going to be chances to win, but there's also going to be a lot of chances to lose. And I think this, and I'll say this and I'll say it again, nobody wants the industry to succeed more than I do. I want everybody to eat their pie. I want everybody to do well, right? But the reality is entrepreneurship is hard and this industry is especially difficult. And to think that those first 100, card applicants are not only going to get into the business but thrive, it's not going to happen. Statistics, the probability says probably maybe 25%. I hope more than that. But the problem with let's say you get into a business, you buy real estate, you have all this infrastructure and shelving and all this stuff. Well, you go belly up, and the good news is you can sell off all your assets and sell your real estate and maybe make a little bit of your money back, right? How does that work because essentially this seems almost like the state owns the dispensaries or the banks own the dispensaries. So if you come in as a card applicant, your business doesn't do well and you have to make an exit, you're walking out on your own. You're not walking out with any real estate. You're not walking out. How does that all work? Is that a fair assumption?
That is absolutely the assumption. That is absolutely, as it stands right now, what it looks like. New York State holds the assets. New York State holds the resale. You are turnkey in, turnkey out. as a business, we know 1 in 3 businesses does not make it through the first year, and that's at a 30% effective tax rate, not 70% that we're going to be facing. So that's the other thing. Any data you're looking at or anything you're thinking in terms of like the average business, don't forget, we're working on much, much tighter margins.
Yeah.
So, that 100 original businesses, by the end of 3 years, I would hope maybe 10 would be standing. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't see the support in the legal, in the business structure, in the administration, in the owner's education, right? The owner should be in control and they should be knowledgeable. They should be able to be compliant and they should be able to take part in every piece of their business if or when they need to, right? You got to know what's going on. The way DASNY is making it seem is that the information isn't going to be so forthcoming for the owners. So yeah, I mean, it's an amazing thing to have somebody open your $1 million or $2 million business for you. But they own it and you're signed in for 10 years. DASNY's a 10-year loan. So
And the other thing that
read the rules, read the stipulations is all I can say.
Well, what worries me, in addition to this, it'd be different if I'm not convinced that the supply chain is going to be quality enough to compete with the already functioning and successful illegal market, because right now, really, I've heard conditional grow licenses and retail licenses, and most, or if not all of the flower, the majority of the flower is going to be outdoor grown flower, and which is fine. But we know that premium quality weed is grown indoors. We've talked about this and joked about this before. Second, so theoretically, unless they happen to give out manufacturing licenses and micro licenses and indoor licenses in the next 6 months, which I would be freaking shocked if that happened. We're really setting up these dispensaries to have a very limited number of SKUs, right? Really kind of mostly focused on outdoor flower, which when you're talking about competing with the unregulated indoor growers is really not going to be it's not going to be a fair fight. Secondly, with the state being very public health focused around cannabis, we have heard very little about lab testing licenses. So what happens, you have 120 farmers, 40 farmers, whatever, 100 dispensary licenses. What happens if there's no lab? I mean, it takes arguably the most infrastructure and upfront costs and personnel and just that general knowledge to start a testing lab, let alone enough testing labs to, be sufficient in the industry. Now, I know there's some CBD labs that are doing it already, but I'm guessing that they're going to be under much higher scrutiny and much more regulations dealing with THC. So what happens if we don't have labs? Do products even make it to the dispensary shelves? How are these people, either A, they're going to have, not have the best product selection, and B, are they going to have a product selection of all if there's this huge bottleneck of no lab tests? I feel like it is genuinely concerning to think about, 100 people about to go all in on these card licenses, and the supply chain is still in shambles at the moment. So I don't know.
Yeah.
After you had brought that up it really changed my whole perspective on this. There's things I was never thinking of that you really did a great job of shedding some light on. So it is kind of scary, to be honest.
Yeah, if you're looking at all the farmers that are participating right now, I think it was at last count, it was maybe 146 or 180 farmers that are allowed to grow. They don't know who they're selling to. They don't know who's testing their product. On paper, these are individuals who have never grown before, right? These are individuals that they grow, but they don't grow weed. So let's talk about all the variables, right? We're looking at a really hot, really dry summer. These folks can't write off the water, or can they? And then what happens if they give up 10 acres, let's say, right? Or however many acres they're allowed to for growing cannabis, and then they don't have anybody to sell to. Now they're more distressed and they've lost a year of their profitable farming. What do they do from there?
I mean, on top of the last 4 years that most hemp farmers have lost their asses.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
sure if I know a single hemp farmer that has said, yeah, the last 4 years have been great.
No, every I have talked to associated with CBD or hemp is like, yeah, we're kind of just holding out,
Yeah.
just waiting for the table to turn in our
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah.
And it's New York State sees the tax dollars, and I get it. It's got to be so exciting to have this idea of billions and billions of dollars coming in. But there's so much regulation that needs to happen. Like, can testing sites be mobile? Because that would open up, like, oh my God, can a testing site have 3 sites? Can one business have 3 sites that are mobile? What is my radius of operation? The only testing site that I'm aware of right now is in the Rochester area, right? So do we send everything to Rochester and then how does it get there, right? Because like technically we can't mail it. So what do we have to drive it there? You know what I'm saying? Like it brings in all these other things where the US Post Office has been very clear that they won't traffic. USPS, FedEx, like all of these business, everyone's very clear that they won't traffic for you. So how, like you said, how do we get it to a testing facility and what testing facility? Like those relationships should already be set. Those contracts should be signed. That's not fair for the farmers. It's not fair for the testing facility either. They don't have any foresight, right? Like no one's giving them rules and regulations for what they can plan for.
Yeah. And I feel like our timeline is dwindling. If they're promising card licenses, by the end of the year,
How am I supposed to write? How do I write anything off? Even like for me to prepare for things, we're halfway through the year. My tax planning is for my business, right? I'm ready for the rest of the year based on what I have right now. But in 3 months, if they change everything, I need to play catch up to maximize for the last month or 3 months or whenever New York State decides to set out the regulations. Your tax team has got to be ready to act because it's going to put you right at the end of the tax year. So you're going to have to take advantage of 22 and then get ready for 23. It doesn't give a lot of time. It does not give a lot of time. So I know all the farmers are feeling pressure and everybody that's like waiting for licensing is feeling pressure. And it's scary because everyone on the financial end and the legal end is also feeling that pressure. We want to set up our clients. We want to contract things out and give you an idea of what to expect, but we don't know what to expect.
Yeah. I mean, we still have, let's say that we do see regs at the end of June. They come out, then we still have another 60-day comment period plus revisions.
Mm-hmm.
Like and then to say, hey, within 6 months we're going to have card app. I'm unsure of how this timeline is going to be met in a way that's successful for the industry. I mean, what about manufacturers, micro businesses? This industry, this license structure was propped up on the fact that micro businesses were going to be the best thing coming, looking at the craft beer and wine industry. And it's like every time, I've asked people in different political offices, chiefs of staff, hey, what's the deal? And it's like, oh, we don't have any information. It's like this big secret, it's something that we've been advocating for 4 years. Nobody has any insight on what the micro business looks like. Nothing. It's like this big secret. And it's like, how do you, we're trying to make big, like life-changing business decisions regarding real estate and partnerships and entity setup and all this stuff. And how do you even begin to make these decisions when we're blind?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yes, flying blind. And it's like, are you being tight-lipped? Or do you really not know? Because I, from my perspective, based on conversation, I think they really don't know.
I know. I think that too.
It's like, OCM, call me. I want to talk.
Yeah. If you're listening, call us. We'll help.
Right.
And I will say, I know it sometimes comes across as, me specifically, that I'm kind of being a negative Nancy and bashing the program. I'm not. I'm a realist, and I want people to, I got into this space 4 or 5 years ago in CBD thinking that I was going to get rich and I was going to be this massively successful CBD and cannabis entrepreneur, is going to be the best thing coming. And it has been the most challenging and it's sometimes soul-sucking thing that I've ever been through. I know that's the case for a lot of people. I think a lot of people who are in that space are looking to cannabis as the end-all, be-all, and the, it's going to be the golden goose. And for some people it will, but it is going to be challenging. And you need to have, small business, medium-sized, big business. You need to have a bookkeeper that knows what they're doing. You need to have accountants and a legal team that knows what they're doing. Because even if you think you're doing all the right things and you have a license, if your books aren't up to snuff and you're not 280E compliant. I was just talking to a buddy yesterday who came from the legacy market in Colorado, got into big time edibles in Colorado, and then came here. He said he got whacked with a $500,000 cash 280E tax audit that nearly buried him. And it was just because you didn't know. You know what I'm saying? It was of no malintent by any means, but just the moral of the story is people be prepared. Surround yourself by knowledgeable people, the right people, and you'll do good. Get off my soapbox.
No, I feel the same way. And it's hard because on our end, we're scrutinizing, right? Like it's very easy to sit in our seats and say, oh, well, this could be different. This could be different. That could be different. But I'm sure that there's a reason why things are going out the way that they're going. The only thing that I can say to anyone who has concerns or fears about 280E is read the California Harborside case. Read it. This business got audited on 5 years of operation, and they owed $11 million in back taxes.
Jeez.
Yeah, and this was, I think it ended in 2012, so it wasn't that long ago. And these are the implications, right? This is a worst case scenario, but this is, if you prepare for what happens in Harborside and you're ready to not have that happen to you, you'll be fine.
That's
right?
Steve D'Angelo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jesus, $11 million in back taxes. Ouch.
Yeah. Imagine, like, you get that bill and you're like, I think there's a misprint.
Yeah, there's like
the decimals
three
in
too
the
many
wrong
zeros
spot.
on this.
Right. Like, and you can't declare bankruptcy. That's the other piece. Like,
right.
You can't just say, oh, I'm out, I'm done. You don't get to do that in cannabis.
So
right?
why can't you declare bankruptcy, and what would be another option? What's the alternative?
I would say, I don't even have the answer for that. I don't even know. That's above my pay grade. These are all things that your team needs to be upfront and honest with you about, because everyone's talking about the success and the excitement, right? But nobody's talking about the risk that is equal to the success. So that is where I think that you and I really do come in and help the community with it, right? Like, I know everyone's excited to have flowers and to grow and to do all these things and to, create generational wealth, as they keep saying. But there's also a lot of risk involved in it. And so you have to recognize the risk and be compliant and abide by the rules.
Lots of risk. Lots and
if
lots
you're not going to abide by the rules, stay underground.
Yeah.
You cannot go half and half. Stay where you are
Yep.
until you're ready to follow the rules.
Yep.
And then when you're ready, 100% in, follow the rules.
Yeah, there's no one toe in, one toe out. I feel like if you're going to do it, you got to do it.
Yeah. You're either in or out. And I hate to say it like that, but you're either in or out. It's too much. It's going to be too much for an individual to try to, like you said, be non-compliant, I guess.
Yeah, it's just, I want to see that the legacy operators who've been building this industry for the last 8 years come in and crush it, and to be incentivized to come in and crush it. And just conversation after conversation that I keep having, it just becomes, for legacy operators, it seems like it's becoming less and less attractive to come in and do the right thing, because I know a lot of people who've been doing this and doing it at scale and really want to do it the right way. They're sick of looking over their shoulder. They're sick of hiding. They want to live a real life. They want to tell their friends what they do. They want to live a double life. And I get that. But what's the cost? Is it 70% of your income and constantly being looked at under a microscope, and one screw up, you could lose everything?
Right. Imagine $500 for every mistake you made. That is the New York State's accountancy fine. $500. And there's verbiage on it. It's per instance, which sounds like it's per week, but it's not. So, think about that when you're building your team.
Yeah.
How much do you trust these individuals? $500 per decision.
That's why they need to hire you.
Call me. The average audit for New York State is going to recover $3,000 to $4,000 per hour.
Jesus.
Imagine an auditor coming in for 5 hours.
You said $3,000 an hour?
Salary.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's their salary. So.
Scary stuff.
It's a lot. It's a lot to think about.
Well, let's end this on a more of a positive note. What is something that you are excited about rolling out with the industry rolling out in New York right now?
I'm so excited to see ancillary businesses and the independent owners that are coming out so strong right now. It's people that I think never considered being a business owner before. They never considered being an entrepreneur. And then all of a sudden their passion met their experts, right? They're allowed. Everyone is it's getting normalized, right? Like my parents are talking about cannabis.
Yeah.
My dad is like, I'm thinking about growing a plant. And I'm like, oh my God, what?
Do it. Hell yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? Like I'm just excited to see the conversation open up and to be able to smoke a joint in front of my parents the same way I would have drank a beer.
Sure. We're getting there too. We're definitely getting there.
Yeah, totally. And it's nice to be in a room full of people that all smoke weed. You know what I mean? Like to not see a drop of alcohol in sight and see everybody happy and smiling and smoking.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. I was actually at my friend had this, she's a musician, and she had this Memorial Day jam session, a bunch of local, Western New York musicians just brought their instruments, jammed all day, and different combinations of musicians and bands. It was so much fun. And there was a cannabis tent up there and doing tastings, and people were smoking, and it was just so normal. And there were kids running around and all this stuff, but it was just some people were having beers from the keg, some people were smoking a joint, some people were drinking the punch, and it was good vibes. It was really, really cool. And I think we're starting to see a lot more in that, which is really exciting.
Yeah. Everybody could use to chill out a little bit right now.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Rosanna, thank you so much for joining me today. You're such a wealth of knowledge, and I appreciate your perspective so much. Where can people find you and get a hold of you?
Check out my Instagram. I'll be posting a lot more for rules and regulations, and you'll see some other fun stuff for bookkeeping coming up. Instagram at Canna Bookkeeper.
Awesome. Rosanna, thanks again. I wish you the best of luck, and I hope that we get you back on the show again here soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, Steve.
This has been another episode of Cannabis Cum Laude here with Rosanna St.John of Canna Bookkeeper LLC. We'll see you next week. Thanks to our friends here at Rockbox Recording and Production in Rochester, New York. They are a full professional podcast and video studio designed by a radio guy for podcasters. Audio, video, voiceovers, editing, whatever. Mouth off at Rockbox at rockbox.com.
You can follow Cannabis Cum Laude on LinkedIn and all other social media platforms, as well as Cannabuzz. And if you'd like to help support the show, search up Cannabis Cum Laude on Patreon. And of course, all of those links are in the show notes. Thanks for watching and listening.